3, 2, 1. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Project Egg Show. Today, we have the honor of speaking with Danny Schaefer, founder and CEO of Pioneer Industries, the nation's first cannabis tourism company. Danny has also been instrumental in the cannabis space and influencing how the laws are being made and helping to shape the future, really, of this whole industry that is quickly transforming from the wild, wild west into something that is really cool. So in addition, Danny has done some amazing things that I couldn't possibly even get close to touching on in this brief introduction. So without any further ado, I'm going to stop talking and introduce Danny. How you doing today, man?
Doing great, Ben. Thank you, man. Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. The pleasure is all mine. And thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I know how busy you are, so that really means a lot.
Yeah, my pleasure.
All right, so let's jump right in. What is your story?
My story? Wow, that's a good one. I'd say for the purposes of this, it's been a pretty interesting experience that brought me to what I do today. Kind of grinded my teeth in corporate America. I actually started my career in debt collections. My father, when I left high school, just hated school, didn't want to go to college. And, my father had told me, if you want to be a doctor, a dentist, you got to go to college, but you got to figure out how to pay for it. He was a Marine, so I thought about the Marine Corps, and he goes, you want to get shot up, messed up, things like that, go to the Marine Corps. And this was right around the time of Desert Storm. And so he said that, in my opinion, son, is the stupidest thing you could do. You got too big of a heart for it. He said, if you want to make good money and always be able to provide for your family, go into debt collections. And my father owned a finance business. So I said, Dad, I'm not going to work for you. He's like, no, I wouldn't hire you anyways. Talked me into going to debt collections. He basically said, when the economy's bad, you collect debt. And if you learn how to collect debt, you can sell any product under the sun. So when the economy's good, you're in sales. Economy's bad, you're in debt collections, and you'll always have a good life. I started in debt collections. I was working for a Jewish debt collection attorney in 2002, collecting Citicorp Diners Club corporate expense cards. So calling high net worth individuals, figuring out how they wanted to resolve their $600,000 balance. So 17, 18-year-old kid, that was a pretty cool experience. Just learned how really law and the money just works and how our really economy works. From there, I was recruited to a software company where I was building some of the first web integrated telephony systems for large call centers. Basically how you could use the internet and the plethora of information that's available in conjunction with phone calls to make them better, more efficient, better customer service, things along those lines. So for that company, I was an implementations manager for about 4 or 5 years and got to deploy our call center tech into hundreds of call centers that did everything you could think. From there, I kind of learned my entrepreneurial spirit. Just got to see how people make money and the various different ways that they just kind of better the economy and create jobs and all these things, which I was enthralled with. So I founded a software company with 2 of my associates from that software company. We ran successfully for about 6 months and had a great time. My first kind of entrepreneurial gig, working for myself, being my own boss with 2 awesome business partners. Unfortunately, we were sued by a large competitor in the space that had a significant litigation budget that they put to use with the main objective of just genuinely putting us out of business. So that cost me about $60,000, $70,000 in attorney's fees and was one of the best lessons in life I could have possibly learned. So from there, that was my first kind of entrepreneurial call it failure. But from that, I took just a huge life lesson of, again, the way law and money works. After that, I went into bandwidth infrastructure, learned about, again, technology on a different level, more hardware and fiber optics and all these crazy things. But I was commissioned by that company at the tail end of my employment to do a feasibility study on cannabis. These guys owned a bunch of co-location facilities or server farms that they wanted to turn into basically grows. And they asked me, just being a native in Colorado with recreational on the horizon, to see if this is possible. So we devised a business called Colo Grow, which was to take these co-location facilities, retrofit them so consumers or licensees could cultivate cannabis in these large, $30 million facilities. And they required, power and security and all the components that they use for server farms. So that was where I kind of crossed paths with my former partner and founder, JJ Walker. JJ started this entire concept. He was a pioneer in the promotion space, throws a lot of cool events for New Year's and Halloween and things like this. But he's an event guy and came up with the idea of cannabis tourism. So I joined him shortly after launch and basically told him he was crazy for taking stoners on a tour, getting them stoned. I was like, that's insane. Your insurance must be crazy. But it took me, probably about 2 or 3 months of just learning, who these consumers were, why they were coming out, to really see just the opportunity to do something I was, genuinely inspired by. It was a way to kind of undo the maybe damage I had done in the past. And really just kind of make amends with it of helping people enhance their quality of life, through the use of cannabis. I quickly learned that the guests that were coming out, or cannabis tourists, they're not your stereotypical stoners. They're people that are, struggling with disease, looking for self-treatment. They're entrepreneurs, investors, regulators, these people that are looking for legitimate businesses to show them the wild industry that is cannabis. So it was pretty fun to take something that was, taboo tourism and really turn it into mainstream tourism. So now, almost 5, approaching 6 years later, we've taken the concept and have just created a whole new path for what is cannabis tourism.
Now that is inspiring.
Thank you.
That is a hell of a journey, my friend.
Thank you.
Now, the question that I have is, you've been going for, well, I have a lot of questions, but you've been going from venture to venture and moving from the finance business and into entrepreneurship, into cannabis, and you're learning about money and the law and all these different things and into software. What has been that common thread amongst them that has pushed you through?
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I was talking to one of my actually management team just the other day, and finally, came to the realization that I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, doing exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. And that this position I hold now has really proven everything I've done before has been building blocks. And I came with the perfect background and expertise to do what I'm doing now. So I'd say the common thread is my new kind of life mantra is to, change the world with people I enjoy and make money doing it. And, in debt collections, it was a tough business. You're speaking with people at their worst of times, and we worked for attorneys as well. So we were garnishing wages and leaning bank accounts and doing all sorts of stuff that's just, really nasty. On the same hand, we're problem solvers. There was a problem, and the people that, wanted to make amends with it and do right by it, we used to do all sorts of creative things for them to help them. So really, I think helping people has always been a driving force. Surrounding myself with, like-minded, complementary, but as extremely diverse group of people as humanly possible, has been important to me. That's constant pursuit of knowledge. If it, doesn't challenge me and doesn't grow me personally, professionally, I'm not interested. And then of course, by, doing right by people and growing personally, professionally, that endless pursuit, then the money comes. And as long as that's not the driving force, that's where I've just found it brings reward far beyond any monetary reward I could ask.
I find it very interesting that you were talking about growing personally and professionally, because very recently, and I'm talking like 2 or 3 Sundays ago, and I remember it was a Sunday. I actually took one of those roller papers, like the big things of roller paper that you can write and then you can roll and keep writing. It's like, no artificial limits on how much you can write. And I sat down and I literally sat there for hours writing what I thought was my philosophy on life, and what is the purpose of life.
Yeah.
And what I discovered after like 5 hours of doing this and a couple cups of coffee later, was that the purpose, and I think this can apply to me and anybody else too, is to really go down a journey of self-discovery and to constantly learn about yourself, to constantly understand who you are at your core, right? Because there are layers. There are layers. There's who you are at your core. There's the external influences that have shaped you, and it's hard to tell which ones are which. Then they mingle and create new beliefs, and then you're always progressing. So more are constantly being added to that, right? So along your journey of growing and developing, how have you really drilled down into understanding who you are at your core?
Yeah, it's a constant process to just self-reflect. I think there's only so much that you can do yourself. I think there's so much of that to your point, you're, influenced or may think about yourself, through the periphery or perception of others.
Mm-hmm.
I actually did a really cool, or say 2 recent events that I think have just put me on a path I'll likely follow the rest of my life. One was a life coaching process. It's called Your Life on Purpose, basically. A guy by the name of Mike Valentine. But he did a really cool exercise. It was something my partner actually encouraged that kind of put your whole life in perspective. There's a lot of studies about trauma and how you handle traumas and how they affect you. And, the certain things that you do that you don't understand why, could have been something that, is ingrained in you from when you were a kid. But, ultimately his work, he asks you a handful of questions as far as like, what's one of your earliest memories, your most traumatic memories, your best memories. And you tell these stories. And while you're telling the story, he's whiteboarded behind you, writing out all these things. And at the end of it, he echoes back a lot of the things you already know about yourself, but filtered into 2 perceptions. One is the red stuff, the bad gas, the things you tell yourself that stop you from pursuing the blue stuff and the things that are really important to you. And it's the stereotypical, I'm not smart enough, I'm not pretty enough, whatever these things are, everyone has their own. But how, he identifies those off of, your earliest memory, your best memory, your worst memory, and echoes back all the things that most people already know about themselves, in a black and white, don't do the red, do more of the blue. That was really, really inspiring. And I think just helped, put my life and just my periphery and perception into order and in a way that I could reference it. The other was 212. I signed up for a pretty awesome entrepreneurs called Summit. That's hosted by Adam Bornstein and his brother Jordan. It's basically 60 entrepreneurs and 30 mentors. Mentors are people like, Tim Ferriss and Frank Blake from Home Depot and, the founder of WordPress and the, people from Entrepreneur Magazine. I mean, you name it, some of the most inspiring and successful individuals you could ask for. But what was really cool was their process of actually applying. It's they have thousands of applications. They only take a handful of them. I was lucky in the sense the year prior actually came out on our cannabis tour. We didn't know who they were at the time, and they were just a bunch of well-dressed, nice guys doing a private tour. But a year later, they invited me to attend their conference. So as you apply and you tell them about your business and your personal life, and it's a pretty rigorous process, throughout the experience, you're coupled with these mentors that have immense strengths in various different categories. And they kind of take your business plan and to some degrees your personal life apart and then help you put it back together. And to see, the things that I've told myself and the things that I'm pursuing or my future business plans, not only are they not batshit crazy, they're attainable, they're, creative, they're, touch all of the kind of check boxes of this is viable, this is feasible. And there's guys like me who came from less in some capacities that have done more. And so it was inspiring to be, part of a network that can, I think, assimilate to the challenges that come with being an entrepreneur, can inspire you. And then, of course, are just great mentors. I think that's just a common theme is, look outside of yourself. There's a lot of resources out there, and you'll be surprised at the people that are more successful than you, that would be willing to spend time with you, as it's really building upon their legacy and exuding their value, giving them the reward they want, and really helping people. So yeah, I think those were two really common ways. And then, most importantly, just being true to yourself. I say your perception's your reality. So being sued in one of my ventures for, I think combined was a few $1 million lawsuit that probably would have destroyed my life, could have been one of the worst moments of my life. As I reflect on it, it was probably one of the best. And to fail really hard was something I needed at that time, and has kind of, built me with confidence that I need to really grow in the right way and capitalize on what I could do.
When you were talking about the red gas and the blue gas in the first that first part,
yeah.
What were the similarities between the don't do and when you then worked with those mentors and they were helping to kind of pick apart and reconstruct your vision moving forward and your life currently? Like, what were where was the overlap there?
Yeah, it's pretty funny. They're pretty significant overlap. And again, it's a lot of the stuff you already know about yourself or would assume about yourself. But to hear it and to be aware of it was very important for me in the kind of life coaching exercise. And it's something as part of the work that you read constantly. You're looking at this thing at least once a week, if not every day in some capacities. And you kind of go through trends where it's really, really relevant, and you got to read it every hour. And there's other times where you pull it out once a month and reflect on it. But having that awareness allowed me to really capitalize on the 212 event and being in a room with people like Sam Parr of thehustle.com. Arguably one of the most, I'd say, strategic, content creation companies with an amazing email list and just a really genius business model behind it. He started with nothing more than a small network of email addresses, some web design experience or background, and a lot of fucking hard work. To see what he built is tools that are readily accessible to all of us. He just found a way after multiple, I would say, marginally successful and or failed endeavors, how to really provide an outlet for his passion and, that commitment and, failure is not an option type conviction. It's pretty amazing what, we're capable of this day and age. I think it's much different than our parents' generation or our grandparents' generation. The things we have at our disposal is there's no excuse.
Oh, you're absolutely right. And I feel like the access that we have to both information and to each other is just insane. I mean, you and I connected on Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I sent you a message a couple weeks ago and we had never met before in person. Mm-hmm. And, we had a quick conversation. We're like, all right, let's do it. And now we're here and, we get to have a conversation face to face. I mean, yes, it's over Zoom, but face to face, that is incredible. That is incredible to me. And, I'm very grateful for that, for that access and the technology that we have and the resources that we have, and also the willingness of incredible people like you to step up and speak. So, I want to acknowledge and thank you for that. So you've gone through all this self-discovery. You've been on this incredible journey. It seems like your business right now, you're very happy in, and you're able to put in all of your passion, and you have that creative outlet. But what is it exactly that you're trying to accomplish? Like, what is your mission here? What, at the end of the day, or 100 years from now, like, what do you want to be the legacy that you leave behind with what you're doing?
Yeah, that's a valid question, and I'd say it constantly evolves, as it should. The separation from personal professional, as an entrepreneur isn't clear. It's constantly blurred. But outside of kind of successful, business adventures or otherwise, I've got two amazing kids. I've got a 7-year-old boy. His name is Rowan. He was born on my birthday. And then I have a 2.5, almost 3-year-old girl, Alana, who was born on Father's Day. So outside of business, I'm personally the luckiest guy in the world. And I have two amazing kids. And as I, kind of take my life experiences and just look at the broader spectrum of the world or the universe, I look at it through my eyes and also my kids' eyes. And I wonder, what all of this power and privilege that we have before us, how it could be used for good, not only to better my life and better my family's lives, but, for the generations ahead of us. Warren Buffett, it's you're experiencing shade because someone before you planted a tree, type mentality. But I think one thing that's really kept me in cannabis, it's been probably one of the hardest ventures or industries, you could possibly choose. It's still federally illegal. It's a Schedule I narcotic. We've got in disputes with our local police, jurisdictions over consumption, and we had to change state laws. And I think it's my mom at one point is like, why do you keep doing this? This is so difficult. Why do you keep doing this? You go make a lot of money doing something else easy. But at the end of the day, I decided that, I'm convinced that cannabis is probably one of the, most significant substances known to man that can really provide just some amazing impacts, medically, recreationally, industrially. I think we've barely scratched the surface of the capabilities of, THC and the cannabis or marijuana plant being the female, versus the male plant and hemp. That I think as you kind of look at it, 10 years from now, it'll be like, alcoholism's down, crime's down, incarceration's down, industries are up, these kinds of things that, to be a part of it is an absolute honor. So I would say, again, to change the world with people I enjoy and make money doing it, and genuinely just practicing and living that every day, is what kind of keeps that drive. And then also, I think for entrepreneurs, one thing I've learned and have been mentored on in the past is, really defining completion is, this is not the last business I will be a part of, own, operate, build. It's the one I choose to use as my outlet today, but being, aware that may change, in the near future, and being okay with that. And saying, at what point is this one complete and can I move on to the next one? I think is the only way you'll stop yourself from going crazy. Otherwise, these businesses can be all consuming, and I'll be damned if I miss my kids growing up because I was too busy at work. That bullshit. So yeah, I think it's a balance for sure.
I had a conversation with my dad a couple of years back, and I'm very close with my parents. Anybody that knows me knows that. And family is very important to me. And I was speaking with him. We were actually at the beach, I think in Gulf Shores or something like that. And the little pool that you can go to right before the beach. Mm-hmm. Well, we were in that pool after the day, because I think if you're at the beach, go to the ocean. But then anyways, that's a whole nother can of worms. So we were at the pool and we were chatting, and he was telling me about when I was growing up, and he had this opportunity, this business opportunity. And I'm Jewish. You and I spoke about that, but for those who don't know, I am Jewish. And one of the bigger holidays in Judaism is Hanukkah, and it's in December. It's close to Christmas, and it's 8 days. And I think I was like 3 at this time. So this was like 21 years ago or something like that. And he was saying you were 3 years old and it was the second night of Hanukkah. And I had the option to go and, speak to these people, have this meeting about this deal. And my dad's partner was the guy who was trying to bring my dad in. And my dad was like, I'm going to have to pass on this meeting. And his partner said, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity. He said, and my dad said, no, the business opportunities will come and go, but to be with my wife and my son on the second night of Hanukkah when he's 3 years old, that is a once in a lifetime opportunity. And that, him telling me that, has stuck with me forever. And when you were saying, what you just said about, being there for your kids, like it reminded me of that. And, I truly believe that family is the most important thing. And it's, I thought that was really, really cool what you said.
Thank you. Really, really, it's your legacy and the things you leave behind. And, whether it's family or businesses or relationships or friends, I think having those core components and philosophies are necessary. As advantageous as it is, it's a really tough world out there, and it's easy to get distracted and depressed or anxiety or whatever these things are without having just some of those foundational components. And being, for me, it's integrity and trust, and a handful of these just non-compromisables that if they're not involved in the relationship or otherwise, it makes it really easy to say, I'm not interested. If you don't respect that I've got a family and you want to call me into a meeting the second day of Hanukkah, well, you won't be a good business partner for me. So next. And yeah, it's good to say no. And I think no, proceed the right way, it just means the next opportunity. So to not be afraid to say no and to kind of maintain your personal integrity through these things is the uncompromisable, and what allows you to reflect back and really pat yourself on the back that you did something good.
Where do you feel like you developed those core values? Like, were they instilled? Do you feel like instilled in you by your family, or where did that really come from? How'd you develop that?
Yeah, I think I've, as far as family values, unfortunately, I didn't have the best upbringing, or I'd say fortunately and unfortunately. As I think at a pretty young age, I learned a lot of ways of who I didn't want to be, what I didn't want to do. And for my personality, that was probably better than, someone telling me how to do it. So I've always been kind of strong-willed in that mentality of, sometimes picking the hardest path. So that was important to my upbringing. And then just support system, my mother and my sisters are just an amazing support system. My father was a great support system. Unfortunately, it passed. But through a handful of those challenges, it's just good, kind of opportunities to reflect and really decide what's really important to you, what brings you joy. And it's like a pie chart. There's only so much room in this pie, and how much of your effort, energy, time, resources, do you want to give to these various components? And then also, if you don't have an end goal in mind, you're shooting in the dark, and it makes it really hard to define, is that worth your time, and what's the true cost of those things? But I would say between, just being aware of your bandwidth, where you invest that time and what rewards you expect out of it, making sure it's the rewards you're actually pursuing, is important. And then also just keeping in mind, the time value. One of my previous partners in our software company, we came together after being sued. We had to take a 2-month or 2-year off due to a non-compete. And then we came back together to build a bigger, badder version of that company, which I fortunately ended up selling my interest in. But that was probably one of the most successful business endeavors I've ever been in the sense that the three of us came together and said, what point are we content? And we had a number goal. And then it was, other than that, we want to shoot guns, play golf, spend time with our family, do all those kinds of things. And that was probably the most fun I've ever had. and just really relishing in being content. I think another thing we constantly overlook is it's never enough, and unfortunately, more isn't an actual goal. So to define that, I think define your completion will save you a lot of heartache and insanity.
So we've been talking a lot about some very ethereal concepts, and I really like that. And I'm also really interested in understanding your outlook of the future, because I think, from what I can tell, you're in a very unique position in a very new industry in the greater scheme of things. I know you've been kicking a lot of ass in the law side and making some changes, and I really want to know, where do you see the industry going? You mentioned how we're barely scratching the surface on the medical side, the recreational side, the industrial side. Where do you really see this industry going? And what do you see as some of the long-term implications of what you're doing?
Yeah, so I think it's really what kind of kept me into cannabis. Is the more I researched it, basically trying to talk my mom, who's basically a nun, into why I'm giving up my traditional corporate career and just had a baby and getting into cannabis full-fledged. Was a really tough conversation, but the more research I did, the more it genuinely just pissed me off. Is reading about the endocannabinoid system and the fact that cannabinoids are in every living substance, but the most cannabinoid-rich substance we know to man is cannabis. The way that our founding fathers cultivated hemp, used it as a rotating crop for corn, which of course was an agricultural strategy. But the way that hemp and cannabinoids were ingrained into our food system, as obviously they would grind up the hemp, cattle, they would use it as cattle feed, then they would eat the beef from the cattle, just the importance of this kind of sensitive ecosystem. And the fact that, a lot of these things were known, but at the same time, it was made an illegal substance. And not only an illegal substance, the most illegal substance. And the amount of research and propaganda and things like this that went, very specifically into making sure people didn't know that they could grow their medicine in their backyard, that it can replace their recreational habits with alcohol. I come from a family that's been riddled with alcoholism, and I've seen what people do, when they're intoxicated to that degree of that type of substance. So I think as the kind of science and research and studies and government and economic systems kind of get behind, understand, and really figure out how to leverage, cannabis, that it'll change the face of the world. There's just a lot of different attributes that they're finding in the ways that, the plant can be used for the flowers and the cannabinoids and things like this, again, for the medicinal attributes. If you ask me, cannabis is likely going to be the cure for a lot of these diseases we're currently, dependent on pharmaceutical drugs for, but different from synthetic, God knows what it does to you in the long run, type of treatment plans. Again, this is natural. And that was the way I won my mom over, was God put this on our green earth. So which one is it? Either he provides everything or he doesn't. And it can't be a but in this case. So I think the medicinal side's huge. The recreational side's huge. Again, providing an other option to tobacco. They've proven hemp is not addictive, but can be smoked. The carcinogens, they're still trying to figure out what that looks like, but just due to the fact it adds a recreational thing that can be combusted without being addictive is huge for a lot of people that, suffer with smoking tobacco. The replacing of alcohol is huge. The therapeutics of topicals, transdermals, infused lubrication creams. I mean, I could go on and on and on and on. I call it performance enhancing drugs, where there is virtually a strain for everything. or I want to geek out and write on my whiteboard, there's a different strain for that. Versus when I'm done boxing and my whole body's sore, I take something else for that. So I think as that just gets more integrated into society, again, touching every important component of our economy, is going to be huge. And it's unfortunate the way that it's been handled to this point and the stigma that's been created. But I find more commonly that most people's pushback about cannabis stems from a lack of education, is they're repeating, their rhetoric that's been, impressed into their minds without actually thinking about it and asking themselves or understanding, some of the really important components. So yeah, I think the shaping of the publicly traded companies, institutions that are starting to research it, some of the research that's been done by Israel, as it comes full circle, you're going to see a major disrupt in alcohol, tobacco, pharmaceutical, healthcare, things like this, that coincidentally are some of our largest economies. So from an economic side, I think it's huge. From a community impact, to address the misappropriation of incarceration of African Americans and things like this, to give police officers resources to enforce real crimes. I think the impacts to our community will be exponentially greater than even the economic impacts. And for my benefit and for the benefit of my children and my friends, I think that's change well welcomed, and I'm eager to see it.
That's incredible that one thing can have such an impact on the whole world on so many different levels. That is incredible.
Yeah, and the negatives, I've listened for, paid attention to the negatives, and there's very few. So it's inspiring for sure.
So shifting gears a little bit, one of the things that I think is a bedrock of humanity is connection. Mm-hmm. And on a lot of different layers. And I know I keep saying the word layers, but I think it's very relevant to everything we've talked about. So I'm going to keep saying. So I want to know, I'm interested in learning your philosophy on developing deep, meaningful, and genuine connection with another human being.
Wow, good question. And very timely posed. So yeah, I think it all starts with just being true to yourself, knowing who you are, what you want, your goals, your weaknesses, your traumas, your all these different types of things. One of my other partners says, you do you often. Reminded me to tell my son that instead of saying I'm proud of you, that you should be proud of yourself. So I think kind of self-awareness is just the prerequisite to having any good relationship in life, personally or professionally. Beyond that, as you're genuine to yourself, you can be genuine to someone else. I think listening is another important attribute, and listening to learn, not listening to respond. You have a different layer of understanding when you have no motive. And I think the other most common weakness I kind of see in society, being an employer as well, is people's ability to communicate and articulate, their wants or their needs, or to, broach a tough conversation. And in my career, I've learned that time value factor is most of the things you're struggling with will drag you down as long as you allow them to. And the sooner you rip the Band-Aid off and, grab the bull by the horns, the better off you are. So I think those are the fundamentals, but, a good relationship is a fair value exchange. It's like a negotiation. And unless you, understand what you're seeking, can articulate your wants and needs, you're not really setting yourself up for success. To also understand the same from the other party, and to really define, what a reciprocal relationship looks like. is invaluable. And then of course to celebrate it and to, set those goals in whichever facet of your life these relationships exist, and then to find a time to reflect and to celebrate on that. Whether it's a subtle note, whether it's high five or a bonus or whatever else it is, people like that acknowledgement and that appreciation. Goes into a lot of the Dale Carnegie books, and how to win friends and influence people is mostly how to compliment and commend people, and how you get more bears with honey than you do with bees. So kind of a complicated response to your question, but I think I focus on just integrity and genuine connections. And if it's not genuine, I'm not interested. And leaving capacity for those genuine relationships by not filling your life with the bullshit ones.
It's interesting how two of the things that you mentioned were relationships and communication. And I think it's all interrelated. But I would really like to drill down into the communication side. And particularly when you were talking about being both an employer and an entrepreneur, a peer to other entrepreneurs, and then also a father. How do you see, or where do you see the most room for improvement in communication today?
I think I'm a quality versus quantity kind of guy, right? I think too oftentimes now you spout off the first thing that comes to your mind. I was brought up in an environment where you use this first before you use that, and to know that it's okay to sleep on it and to kind of process your emotions and to reflect on your emotions to decide where this feeling is coming from. Is that something they said they did, or is it something you're struggling with, or are a place that you would go for another reason? Is it a projection? All of these kinds of things. I think quality communication is key. The next piece is just the integrity behind it. Do what you say you're going to do. Say what you actually mean. Have valuable, tangible communication. Or you're just blowing smoke and wasting everyone's time. And I think too oftentimes, as an employer, as a father, in being in relationships in my life, it's too oftentimes it's fluff. So I think as you find those genuine connections that are worthy of it, you can only manage so many of those in your life. Early days, you want to be friends with everyone. As you get older, it's I think they say you're a composition of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So fortunately for me, 2 of those are my children, and the other 3 are people I respect. So I think in communication nowadays, it's probably too frequent and too easy, versus, in my opinion, it lacks just that substance and genuine expression that's really needed to get the result everyone's looking for.
So I want to put you on the spot,
Mm-hmm.
and ask you to put me on the spot.
Nice.
Okay. How could I have communicated better during this interview? How could I have been more genuine, been more authentic, brought more integrity to the game, and just been a better communicator?
I think you've done a phenomenal job. I'd say the only area that most people respond well to is like self-criticism, right? Where you're something that you struggled with, or one of your weaknesses, or, one of the areas that you've, your aha moments are what people really like to hear, as it puts you on a level ground. One thing about being a, good communicator to someone that's not, is that it can be very easy to be overbearing, or to kind of assert yourself in a higher authority, to the point that people are hesitant to truly say what's on their mind. So I find that's the adverse reaction of being a good communicator, is you sometimes don't get the results you're looking for, as people nowadays are very self-conscious and uncomfortable with themselves and things like that. So they defer back into their shell and it kind of defeats the purpose. So I'd say, yeah, advice is don't be afraid to call out your fuck ups and be genuine about that, because you'll get to reach people on a different level when they're not intimidated by you and your power and your strength and your force.
That was very helpful. Thank you for that.
For sure.
What's your
same?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was speaking and not giving you space to speak.
Yeah, no. And I'll ask you the same. How could I have communicated better?
I really think you did a fantastic job. And there were a few times when you were saying something and like you highlighted the overarching theme, and I was like, man, I really wish you'd drill down in that. But then you would drill down into that right after. It's like you were setting the foundation, and then you were going deeper into it. And I actually really, really enjoyed how, because I find a lot of times people want to take it back to business, but you actually took it more personal a lot of the time, or some of the times, which I really like, because I find that anybody can learn how to, send an email or do copywriting or, figure out a certain tactic. But like, I'm interested in learning like who you are as a person. And so I felt, because you communicated very openly with me and you were very transparent, I felt very connected to you throughout the whole interview. So yeah, I don't know if that's actually helpful or useful.
Yeah, no,
but
it does. Thank you. But yeah, I think that's the kind of key to entrepreneurial success, is just being happy with yourself and the skin that you're in, is the way to be a real leader and to instigate real change. As I genuinely, and learning this political system and things like that, it's, people have an affinity to people, not to business, not to concepts. It's the story behind it, the why behind it, that really propels, people to engage and success. So yeah, I hope at minimum somebody else hears this podcast and helps them with anything they're struggling with, for sure.
Absolutely. And I love what you said about that, by the way, because what I've run into a lot, and I've totally done this a ton, was, and I'll speak from, my experience, and this is something I did not do well. I would always look for a tactic or for a strategy. Mm-hmm. And I didn't realize that it's not the specific tactic or the strategy. It's the character of the person who's deploying those, who's taking the action. That's what really matters. And I feel like it was kind of in front of me the whole time that, if I would do research or go read something or learn something from somebody, it was the person that I was learning from that really inspired me to take the action there. It wasn't the specific tactic, because you could teach anybody that with specific thing. It's the person, the human being behind that, the people. That's what's important.
Yeah.
That's what's important.
And I think that's another just communication tactic, is to, listen, to be aware with who you're speaking to, their tone, their influx, their speed, their things like that. And good communicators match that. And you'll hear, as, someone that's customer service tactics, someone's very bullish and aggressive. You actually slow down, speak quieter, lower your tone. They'll listen to you more. So I think the same exists in just life, and having that upper or advantage in life is to be in tune with yourself, to use communication, and then of course to be flexible in who you're dealing with to make sure you get your end result. I think is key.
What's your greatest theory?
Greatest theory. I think that's a good question. I wouldn't say I have a greatest theory. I compare kind of life to chess, and just I also enjoy the game of strategy. and being cognizant and aware that you've only got, so many pieces on the board. There's rules to those pieces and how they play in the game, that you have an opponent in virtually everything. I don't care if it's your kids. When I'm negotiating why we can't have ice cream at 11 o'clock in the morning, I have an opponent. And just the, limit in the number of moves that you can make. And then, of course, being cognizant and aware of the end result. So I think that's just a genuine philosophy that I've learned and kind of practice and preach often. And then others, I'd say, is you really get to define your success and your happiness. And that's a right bestowed upon you, as well as a responsibility to yourself and the people around you, to really define what that looks like and to, be aware of it. As if you don't define it, it's the kind of definition of insanity, doing the same thing over again, expecting a different result.
Is there anything about yourself that you think is an important part of who you are that we did not talk about today? In other words, what did I miss?
No, I think you got the meat and potatoes of it for sure. And I would say I'm a student. There's still a lot of things I'm constantly challenged by, striving for. That pursuit of knowledge is invaluable. So as much as I am, call it successful in some capacities, I'm a novice and have no idea what the hell I'm doing in other capacities. So I think you'll never be a master of all, and to take things lightly, laugh at yourself, remind yourself you don't know everything is also an important quality for sure.
I'm 24. I mentioned that before, and the reason I bring it back up is because it's relevant to the question. But what question should I be asking you, specifically me, asking specifically you, that I just wouldn't think to ask?
You got a lot of my tips and tricks already. I would say probably you would ask this one, though. That's actually a really good question. I think you asked a lot of the important components as far as who I am and the whys and the hows and the things like that. I think the greatest success piece is something you probably would ask, but I'll circumvent that with an answer. And it's just genuinely being a father and, getting to take the things that I've learned and create a better version of myself has been just my most rewarding success. And it's something I highly recommend that you obviously have to be ready for. I waited till I was 26, 27 to have kids. And I'm glad I did, because by far my best success and definitely the definition of my legacy.
Danny, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show today and sharing this time with me. It's been very special, and it's truly been an honor to speak with you. So thank you.
Same, Ben. Thank you for having me on, for sure.
And to everybody who's listening, watching, I want to thank y'all. Y'all are the reason that I do this, and I love y'all very, very much, especially you. You know who I'm talking about. And I want to just really thank you from the bottom of my heart for supporting the show and sticking with us all the way till the end. Danny, thanks again.